Well, welcome to PacWest Bigfoot. This is David, and Merry Christmas. This Black Friday, guys. Merry Christmas. Just want to say I had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Hopefully you did too. And um, here's the deal for this Christmas giveaway in December. Just so you know, if you guys want to sign up for the free giveaways, I do a giveaway every month. I announce the winners around the 10th of every month, and this month it's going to be pretty awesome. I've got a special little treat for you. A nice little piece of artwork that you can get all framed up if you want to, by Melanie Darling. It's a little Bigfoot sketch. It's pretty awesome. And, of course, a little something something from the old mypacwestbigfoot.com, the shop or the store there. So, with that, if you want to enter to win in December or beyond, go ahead at PacWestBigfoot.com. With that, I'm going to take a little sip of the old Sasquatch coffee here. Mm. All right, and for those of you that complain about coffee sipping here, I don't care. Merry Christmas to you too. All right, let's get in here. This week's encounter story. Oh, by the way, real quick, just some news. I have a special little treat. Tomorrow I'm going to have an actual interview published as well. Just for the fun of it, wanted to throw out an extra little interview for you guys over this holiday weekend for you guys to enjoy while you're kicking back. No work and nothing else to do. Why not? Let's listen in. Okay, cool. With that, let's get going with this week's Bigfoot encounter story. Young woman runs into Bigfoot while hunting in southern Oregon. My name is Penelope, and yes, I love to hunt. While I am much more aware of my surroundings when out and about nowadays, it is because I've seen a Bigfoot out here in the wilds of Oregon. Actually, a female and young one, in fact. I live up the Pistol River a ways, but the particular hunting season when I observed this animal, well, a Bigfoot, I was permitted to hunt a friend's property outside of Selma, Oregon. I never thought in a million years, even after all the stories my dad would tell me of this thing, that this Bigfoot creature existed. But it does, and here's what I experienced and saw with my own eyes. Deer hunter's daughter. Yes, cell phones and social media existed at the time, but you are never prepared for this, ever. I do not care what you are or what you think you might do in the situation I was in. Today I do take my smartphone out of the truck when hunting, but not back in 2003. I was the daughter of a hunter, after all, one who took his passion for it seriously. And I like things a little more old school, if you will. I was out for a few days that November hunting, actually, the last 3 days of the season. I had a chance to hunt a friend of mine, of my family's property, and camp out on it for 3 days. This was outside Selma, Oregon, a few miles or so. I had never experienced anything weird before while hunting, nor did I believe in the legendary monster of the woods. I would soon come to find to be, in fact, a whole lot less legendary than they say. It is real, and I believe they need to be given a wide berth when and if you do come in contact with them. They are massive, powerful, and I have to say, majestic, to be honest. While they are considered to be a monster, and some of their actions do live up to that description, I believe they are simply an animal from what I can tell, and one that is territorial, especially when it comes to their young and food supply. But here is what happened and how I came across a female Bigfoot and its young. Hunting for Prancer. I got there early that first morning, set up camp, which consisted of a pup tent on top of foam pad in the back of my truck in the tailgate, with the tailgate down. I set up my camp near a small seasonal creek at the foot of some decent-sized hills that seemed more like mountains to me. So there I sat, in the shadow of them, setting up and getting myself together for a few days of hunting. This year I had a buck and doe tag, and a premium hunt which allowed me to hunt longer than the usual season, just in case. It was going to be great, and being in a new area made it even more exciting. I got up and decided I would head out and do at least some tracking, and of course bag something if I could, but I was in no hurry. I took a small game trail across the creek and along the bottom of the mountains that sat literally on the other side of it. It did not take long, but I came across, or better yet, scared out two fawn and a mama from some low brush about 20 yards past the creek. I do not shoot mama with young, if you want to know. If there is young, I never, ever, ever shoot a mama. They startled me, and me them, but I continued on. I have to say, there was a point along the trail that I heard and felt a bit uneasy. Okay, I got a slight chill down my neck, to be honest with you. It was just up the bottom part of the mountain, where there were large rocks and cliff-like areas to the west, when I got the feeling of, well, it felt like being watched or something. I heard some rock fall. Personally, though, I thought it was thrown at first, the way it sounded. I was not looking for thrown rocks, just deer, so I did not see the rock fly through the air, but it did sound like it had to have been thrown the way it hit and rolled along the ground. But I could not be sure. Besides, what was going to throw rocks up here, I thought. Still, it gave me the thought that for that moment I was not alone up here, and either a bear, a mountain lion, or possibly another hunter was illegally hunting the area. I was the only one given permission. I was pretty sure of that. Other than the rock that caused some others to tumble down the hillside, there were no other noises other than that of nature itself. I decided to head back down the hillside and get some lunch and call our friends to make sure I was in fact alone out here. Deer screams and howls. The answer was yes, I was alone. There was no other person or people allowed to hunt the property, just me. I ate a late lunch and decided to get some more tracking in before nightfall. That is when I came across the first of the weirdness that should have sent me packing. I headed back down a game trail towards the creek again to cross and do some searching on the far side. I jetted across the stream, and as I did, I heard what sounded like a scream of a deer. The cry had made me almost tumble. It was so loud and a bit frightening. Of course, the sound of rushing water, wind, and I on the move made me think twice for a second, but once I stopped to listen, a scream let loose again, and this time there was no mistake about it. I've heard deer screaming or crying or whatever you want to call it. Once I watched as a cougar took a buck down in eastern Oregon I had my sights on. Sounds crazy and exciting and far-fetched, but it's true and does happen, apparently. This was a deer being killed, or in great distress. I could tell. Unfortunately, I could not tell exactly where it had come from, except it seemed to come from the south of me, maybe up the mountain a bit. Not sure, but I could not be sure of any of that, as the echoes there were horrible. It still caught me off guard and freaked me out a bit, but after a second or two I calmed myself down, thinking that a cougar was nearby and was going to eat now, so I had no worries, I supposed. I was not curious either about the situation and decided to walk the opposite way I thought the sound had come from. A few hours later, and all was calm, and I was back at camp. I settled in for a long night, as the nights were, of course, longer by that point, and I have to say, I remember it being colder than I expected. If it were not for the below 20-degree sleeping bag and portable heater I might have had a pretty good chill going on all night. But I had one anyways, and that was not due to the weather. It came from something howling just after midnight. I remember looking at my watch, and it was 12:45 a.m. About 12:45 a.m. when I heard what sounded like howls coming from the mountain. I believe it was two different individuals. Bigfoot, that is, looking back. The first seemed longer, deeper, and just sounded older, if you can understand what I mean by that. The other seemed younger. The howling was more high-pitched and, well, sounded more stressed than the other. Not that I think it was in trouble, but it seemed stressed, or possibly worried? I don't know. Maybe I was just looking into something far too much because I was hearing what I was hearing was not normal wilderness sounds, at least not normal to me. One would grow to almost a high-pitched wailing, but the younger one, that was high-pitched from the start to the end. It was crazy. I never heard anything like it before or since, and I'm glad about that. It was very creepy. After a few minutes and about 7 to 8 howls, it stopped, and the night went quiet, minus my fire outside and the heater next to me that would turn on all of a sudden and glow orange. Ladies, morning out. Weird, even a bit creepy. I remember thinking after I woke up, the sounds the night before still captured my attention and sometimes my imagination still. But after a couple of eggs and some coffee, I let it go and got to hunting. I would venture past the creek, again heading west along it where I spotted a ton of deer track the afternoon before. It was a very frosty morning, so much in fact that I thought at first there had been a dusting of snow when I woke up, but it was just typical icy Oregon frost. Most of the tracks all moved down the creek in the same direction and never seemed to veer off into the woods, period. Eventually they would cross the stream, I noticed, and head out into the more open fields. It was getting lighter outside, so I decided I would sit it out and wait for them to come back across if they did. I dug myself into the hillside, basically taking the high ground overlooking the creek and anything that would come up it, down it, or over it. I had a clear view of about 40 yards up and down it. That is why I got such a great visual, not to mention I stood still and quiet as a church mouse while staring at something, well, some things I would never have thought existed in a million years. Bigfoot. Mother and daughter and me. I took nothing but a tall thermos of cocoa and coffee mixture, a couple of Cliff Bars, and there I sat. The sun came up, and I believe it was about 30 minutes after it had been just enough to see everything around me when I heard some movement from the west or down the creek. I thought at first that they were people, 2 of them, one tall, one short, walking into view and dressed in all black. Not a smart thing, I thought, instantly knowing that hunting season was still happening. However, after I watched them emerge from around the bend and the trees were no longer blocking them as much, I noticed the weird and almost unnatural walk or gait they had. It was extremely weird, I thought. Not to mention they both seemed to be, well, hunchbacked or something. I raised my spotting scope and quietly took a better look. To my amazement and total disbelief, for a moment I had come to realize, and with a tingle up my spine again, that I was looking at 2 Bigfoot. Both were female, obviously. One, however, was younger, well, I'm not a primatologist or anything, but I would say like early teens, maybe. The other, of course, seemed older. I was close enough, and with the spotting scope could see the gray in its hair here and there along its back. They stood there for a moment in what looked like to be sniffing the air. The creek had risen overnight a bit, I could tell, and was louder as it ran through the bend. Seconds later, they were wading in the creek, about ankle deep, on the smaller one of the 2. Every few seconds or so after that, I would watch as they would bend over a bit and pick something out of the water, tip their upper body back, and eat whatever it was. I'm sure it was crawdads or small brook trout or something they were eating. They were both terrifying and awe-inspiring to observe, I have to admit. I was freaking out. Their arms were so long they hung down past the top part of their calves almost. The hair, both dark in color, was almost the same as was their facial features too. They seemed very ape-like in the way they moved, especially when moving back and forth through the creek on all 4s. Yes, they would stand and eventually walk off, but when in the creek foraging for the most part, they used all 4s to move around. They were covered in thick hair, not fur, and I could see enough that the face was ape-like as well. The skin color was ashen gray on the older one and a bit darker on the younger. The faces were slightly droopy looking. The eyes were squinted, dark, and the brown line was real deep, casting a darkness over the eyes. I got to observe these things for about a few minutes, it seemed, until they were scared off by a familiar sound. They just sat there waiting around on all fours, feeding along the creek. Hunters gone wild. I watched as they came out of the creek and picked something up off the ground. I did not realize it before I'd seen them appear, but apparently they had carried a small doe carcass with them to the creek. It had no head, and the rear legs were gone, ripped out of the sockets, I supposed. They stood there on all fours. The younger one bent over and seemed to lick at the creek water. Then she turned and started in on eating the deer in the most disgusting fashion I've ever seen an animal eat something. The older one continued to flip over rocks in the creek and eat crawdads and fish. Bang! A gunshot went off in the distance, and with that the two Bigfoots stood, dropped everything, and ran up towards my direction along the creek and disappeared in the woods around the bend. My heart sank for a second there, thinking they were going to run right into me. I have also to mention how fast these things are, and the stride they made was huge. I tried to come back with the old cell phone later when I got the nerve up, but the prints were not even impressions. Too much rock and debris around, but I did try. I don't want any fanfare here, just wanted to tell my story real quick with you all. I do not do any research and do not want to be in on the I Saw Bigfoot circuit. Just wanted to share my experience once here. They moved like lightning though, and that was probably the scariest part. I thought they were going to crash right into me through the brush. But at the last moment they turned a bit, and up the mountain they ran. What they can do to that deer, well, now you get why I was scared they would run into me. I prefer to keep my limbs intact, thank you very much. But that is what happened. And I have to say, I do still hunt today, even in that area. I have yet to experience any more sounds or find any more footprints or anything like that in the night or sightings, but I do pay close attention to everything when out there. Thanks, Penelope.